Well, we are so excited to be joined by Dr. Grace Edgar. Dr. Grace has a Bachelor of Music from Centenary College of Louisiana, a Master's of Arts in Theater from Western Washington University, a Graduate Performance Diploma in Opera from Long East School of Music, and a PhD from the University of Houston with a minor in directing. She has sang, acted, directed, and music directed all over the place and is now the Assistant Professor of Theater and Head of Musical Theater at Midwestern State University, MSU, which is in Wichita Falls, Texas. I said Wichita weirdly there, but you'll forgive me. They take classes of about 7 to 8 students per class, only 25 to 30 over the whole school, and we'll talk about that. They offer a degree of BFA in theater, a theater minor, and an MT minor. Dr. Grace, welcome on the pod. How are you feeling today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
I gave that little kind of overview bio of you. Anything, in terms of your journey to MSU that you want to sort of zero in on, or in terms of just what your experience was journeying to the academic world?
Absolutely. So I come to the academic world after being a professional performer. Most of my performance experience was as an opera singer, and I
Hmm.
have some experience as an actor as well. So before coming back to my doctorate, I was a resident artist with Arizona Opera. I performed with Opera New Jersey, Shreveport Opera, Key West Pop Symphony, Growing Stage, Traveling Lantern Theater Company. And then
Hmm.
when I was about 32, I thought I wanted to go back and be a college professor. And
Hmm.
I always knew that I wanted to be a college professor, but I also wanted to perform in order to be an even better college
Yep.
professor. So when I was about 32, I went back to the University of Houston and studied vocal performance and directing. And after that, I had some kids, and then I
Hmm.
got back into academia, and it's been wonderful. It's my dream job. I'm so excited to be doing it. I
Yeah.
am continuing to learn new things. I am now an intimacy choreographer with a diploma from Theatrical Intimacy
Hmm.
Education. So it's great. It's good. I'm happy to be
Super
here.
cool. That feels like a theme of this podcast. If you want to be a professor, just have some kids. Somehow, having kids turns you into a professor. I'm
Well,
dooming myself having just had a child.
I,
Um,
I have to say, when you're performing and you're on the road, that is so exciting.
yep.
And also, when you teach and your students perform and succeed, that is deeply satisfying and
Yep.
gratifying in a lasting way.
Yep. I want to get into MSU a little bit. So first, I want to talk about sort of MSU students. But first, what attracted you to MSU? What was your journey to ending up in Middle State?
Absolutely. I had worked at a previous institution that had a really strong and continues to have a really strong reputation in musical theater. And then I was looking to move to another university and got actually several offers, several interviews, several on campus interviews, and several
Yep.
offers. And I chose MSU for several reasons. One of the reasons is the BFA degree, so that we do have those pre professional degrees in design tech, performance, musical theater, and we also have a teacher certificate. And
Hmm.
this is important to me that we are providing a BFA in performance and musical theater, and simultaneously, we are educating high school and middle school theater teachers. And I think to have the dichotomy of both training programs together
Yep.
feels really good for me as a teacher.
Yep, totally makes sense. And we'll talk a little bit about the degree and the as we get into the second half, we'll talk about the sort of audition and admission process. Very cool and kind of unique or rare to be a BFA that is non-audition for admittance. So we'll get into that a little bit. But I'd love to talk about just the kind of student that you attract. So in the same way that you were attracted to the school, what does it tend to be? What does an MSU student tend to be, as you can tell that is distinguishable from other kinds of students? What sort of makes them unique or makes them the specific MSU brand or whatever?
That's such an excellent question. A lot of our students come with open minds and open hearts, and that is what I am looking for. I am looking for a student who is willing to be silly, willing to
Hmm.
take risk, willing to explore, willing to try things, and be playful. So, those are very important things. When we have a student come and audition and interview for us, the audition and the interview is important, but what happens after the audition and the interview? with the student maybe taking a little bit of direction, like, can you try that monologue as a period piece? Or
Hmm.
can you try that monologue with singing head voice instead of belting right there?
Hmm.
Or how are
They were
your
belting in their
music?
monologues, Dr. Grace? That seems
Oh,
yeah.
in their
In
songs.
their songs,
Often
yeah, I
they'll
understood.
present a song and a monologue.
Yeah, yeah, I'm
But,
good.
maybe can you pick a different vocal registration? And so I think a
Yep.
willingness to play and explore is important. We also ask our performers to have a secondary area of design or
Uh-huh.
tech. So we want our actors and our designers and our technicians to work. So if
Yep.
somebody comes in and they are the next Sutton Foster, that is great. We're going to put them on stage, and we're also going to say, would you like to learn about the lights or the sound or the costume design or the box office? Is there another area of theater that interests you, so that while you get gigs performing, if you have a period of time where you're not engaged, what else can you do
Yep.
in the theater to pay your rent?
Yep, expanding those other hyphens we talk about so much on the show. I love that. I mean, that was exactly my next question. Again, it's a specific. The BFA in theater is kind of an interesting dichotomy because the BFA tends to mean very specialized and professional, and exactly what you said. But then it's basically what level of specialization should our students have in performance if they're looking at MSU? Are they 80% performers and 20% interested in stage managing or lighting or something like that? It's like, well, and you don't have to have exact numbers, but how does it feel in terms of like how specialized? I obviously know I want to be in the theater if I'm getting a BFA in theater, or at least that's my interest. But how specialized am I at this point if I'm looking at going? Is it two or three, four options? Is it just having exactly two? So how do you look at your students in terms of their broadness or their narrowness within the theater world?
When they come in as freshmen, it's very broad. So usually the folks, our prospective students, will come to us with one area of interest. That could be, I want to be a musical theater performer, or I want to be a costume designer. And then once we get the freshmen on campus, we start to ask them where their interests are. And
Hmm.
so, and then when we plan out the assignments, the production assignments for the year, we try to tailor that to the student's interest. So if a
Hmm.
student comes in as a freshman, we just did interviews with our freshmen about how their first semester went. And in that interview, we said, what are production aspects that you're curious about or that interest you? So the student can say, I'd like to learn how the soundboard works, or
Hmm.
I'd like to run the spot, or I'd like to work in the costume shop and get a work study there. And so that's how we'll start. We will say, like, okay, for the third show of the season, let's have you be our light board op.
Hmm.
And for the 6 or 8 weeks that we're in production for that show, you're going to work with a faculty member to learn about the board, and then you'll run the board during the show. And at the end of that semester, we'll say, how did you like running the board? Would you like to continue to learn more about that area of design, or would you like to explore something else?
Yep.
So, generally, that's what I want to say. Generally, by the junior year, the students have an idea about their interest and their strengths, and we can really start to give them bigger opportunities. For example, we did Mr. Burns as our first play with music at the beginning of the year, and the actor that played Mr. Burns and sang in that is going to be my lighting designer for Godspell.
Hmm.
So it's that actor who is, getting role after role after role with us, that also wants to explore lighting design. And
Yep.
so we've created opportunities for this actor to do both of those things, to
It,
be a star in the musical and then to lighting design later in the season.
it's so cool. And we've talked a lot on the pod about sort of the advantages and disadvantages of the size of a program, right? But you're really speaking to some of the advantages of being a small program. Some bigger programs could not possibly have that level of specific detail per student per 4 years. It just wouldn't be possible if you have 200 students over the course of your school itself. So I love hearing about some of the wonderful flexibility and how it can be different from student to student over the 30 students over the 4 years. Is there something in terms of, if you could take us through the curriculum, what is said? I know there's some rules in terms of what a BFA has to be. What is said about the curriculum in terms of what is rigid and what can change depending on students' interests?
Absolutely. So all of the students are going to take a sort of introduction to stagecraft, lights, sounds. That's going to be in the curriculum. All of the students, regardless of what their focus is, are going to take voice and diction, and that is learning IPA and projecting. I teach that class, so it's
Mm-hmm.
IPA, and I do Linklater in that course. Um, Students are going to take what we call dramatic analysis, which is script analysis. And
Mm-hmm.
script analysis is going to be the beginning of the directing track, and every student is going to have exposure to directing. So after script analysis, they will take directing and then they will move into play production. In play production, each student who wants to direct a one act will get a fully supported and produced one act play at the end of their junior year. I also teach singing for the actor. So everyone who is a musical theater performance major is going to get 4 semesters of singing for the actor with me, which is going to be private voice lessons and also scene work. We have an acting series that I believe is 3 required acting courses and
Mm-hmm.
additional optional acting courses. Each theater student is going to take 3 theater histories with the option of also taking musical theater history. Of course, everyone takes makeup design, costume design. So we get a lot of the bases covered in
Mm-hmm.
theater, and then each BFA from there really specializes, and the students are able to personalize that track. We had a student who graduated a year ago, and during her time with us, she directed 2 shows on main stage, did beautiful costumes for some Chekhov that I directed, and starred in many, many shows.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that's unique and special about MSU is I teach the directing courses, and every year one of our 4 main stage productions is directed by a student, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is amazing. So we do one of our main stage productions each year is directed by a student. We just had a student direct the Thanksgiving play, which was very exciting for
Mm-hmm.
us.
Super cool. And how many of these classes, I'm just imagining with the smaller class, like freshman, sophomore class sizes, how many of these classes that are performance based are open to the broader university? So am I taking with non-majors? Am I taking with minors? How does that work in terms of the different classes? Which ones are not open to the broader university?
That's an excellent question. So a lot, I would, all of the classes that are lecture classes and classroom classes are open to any student at MSU.
Mm-hmm.
Also, all productions are open to any student at MSU. Once we get into the higher level performance classes, including all of the singing for the actor courses,
Mm-hmm.
that is going to require instructor permission.
Mm-hmm.
So we have, for example, we have a course at MSU taught by theater faculty called Acting for Non-Majors.
Yep.
And we have another course called Acting 1. So usually anyone can take acting for non-majors. A
Yep.
theater major can absolutely take all of the acting courses, but a non-theater major would need to
We
ask
need permission.
permission to be in that class.
Totally makes sense. Yeah. And I guess I'm wondering, of the 30, we sort of were talking about like I'm not going to make everything math based percentages of non-performing interests and how that would work and how broad and it's maybe a difficult question, but I guess maybe let me flip that around. How many of them are interested in performing? Are all of them at least somewhat interested in performing? Are the majority of them? Are some people coming and saying, I'm really mostly interested in lighting design, but I'll try my hand at performing?
That is such a great question. Most of our design tech students try performing at some point,
Uh huh.
and a lot of them do it multiple times.
Uh
But
huh.
there are some students that don't. So,
Yep.
students that are on scholarship are required to audition for shows unless they are a design tech person that is not comfortable with that.
Yep.
So they would get an assignment and not be required to be in a main stage production. Our tech design students are required to take voice and diction. And also, we try to make that really accessible for
Uh huh.
them.
Yep. Well, and we talk about sometimes with, I tell this to the parents who goes, well, what are the chances my child is going to be an actor professionally? I'm like, there are some great transferable skills in those classes too. I'm sure from the design tech world, even just having an understanding of the performance element, and that's not a world that I've gone deep into the design tech world, but I can't imagine a voice and diction class wouldn't be helpful in terms of like your life skills and some of those things
Yes.
moving forward. Yeah.
And also, when a parent comes to me and says that, I like to talk about our teacher certificate.
Yes. Yep.
So I would say my undergraduate degree is in sacred music, and
Mm-hmm.
I was able to use that degree to work in churches, in schools, teaching kids how to play piano and sing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like because I was able to support myself through the journey doing my craft,
Yep.
it informed my performances,
Yep.
made me a better teacher. It really enabled me to have theater and music be my entire world. So I
Yep.
think it's actually very smart to get that teacher certificate,
Yep.
knowing that the students have all the opportunities to audition, direct, perform, because there's always grad school, right?
Yep.
So if the parents are really worried about that, sometimes I'll say this could also be an option.
Totally agree. Let's talk a little bit about just as you look at those 22-year-olds who are leaving, sort of what are you doing to prepare them for their launch into the business? And what does that look like in terms of, are they getting sort of showcase material to go into other cities? Do many of them go to New York, Chicago, LA? Do many of them stay in Texas? Sort of what does the launch look like for most of your students?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are very plugged in to the Southeastern Theater Conference. I am the chair of Women in Theater for SETC.
Mm-hmm.
So we're taking students to audition at SETC. We are also using our professional connection. So a couple of summers ago, a bunch of students and I went up to Big Fork Summer Playhouse. Actually, I had had a lot of students go to Big Fork for summer stock in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And when I met the producers of Big Fork, I said, "Hi, I'm so and so and so and so's voice teacher." And they said, "Oh, come work for us." And I said, "I will." And I said, "And you should hear these folks sing." So there is that sort of situation where I can't always guarantee a job, but
Right.
I can
Yep.
usually get an audition.
Yep. Foot in
So,
the door. Yeah.
working those professional contacts. A couple of summers ago, I directed at Red River Lyric Opera,
Mm-hmm.
and that company was very generous about using our students. And that was an opportunity for our students to do a brand new opera with the composer in residence. Yes. And
Yep.
I also directed at Seattle Public Theater last summer. So we're bringing our students to do auditions, and we're trying to work connections to get the students auditions.
Yep.
When they graduate, a lot of them move to Dallas Fort Worth area,
Mm-hmm.
which is growing a
Yep.
lot. They are building some big sound stages down there for film and television, and we're excited about those possibilities.
Yep.
Some of them are moving to New York and Chicago and working and doing those sorts of things as well.
Cool. And I often ask that question in the conjunction with where your students come from. How many of your students are from the Texas area? I know we'll talk about cost in a second and some of that in-state tuition discount, but how many of them come from Texas versus how many come from the broader country and the world?
Almost all of them come from Texas.
Yep.
So
And
almost all of them come from, I would say, about a 6 hour radius around us.
yes, which is only a part of Texas. Unbelievably, for those of you who don't live in Texas, 6 hour radius, like that's 3 states, right? Nope, not for Texas. Let's talk a little bit about cost. So we very affordable, we found, and even without the in-state tuition, right? The quick crack research team says around 10K. That's with the in-state and about 12K out of state. For does that sound right? Those numbers sound right
That's
to you?
correct.
Let,
Yes.
let's talk about how those work. And I know on the second half we'll talk about the scholarship audition, but let's just talk about scholarships in general. How many of your students, let's say it sounds like most are in-state, so they're paying the 10K. How many of them are paying the full 10K versus what are my scholarship options from an academic or a talent-based or need-based, et cetera?
Absolutely. We have lots of scholarships. So we have the theater scholarship that I mentioned before. That scholarship is up to $1,500 per semester. Freshmen usually start a little bit under that, and we
Yep.
like to raise the scholarship every year and
Yep.
max you out in the senior year. We
Uh-huh.
also have choir scholarships. So some of our theater majors also want to sing in the choir, and they'll get a music scholarship, or they can play in the orchestra or the band and get a scholarship that way. We have academic scholarships. We have first generation scholarships. That's a big push for us.
Yep.
So there are lots of other, we have personal donors who have a
Uh-huh.
scholarship in their name that we're nominating students for all the time. So
Yep.
very few, if any, of our students pay
Very
full
full price.
tuition.
Yep. And it's worth, not to keep just doing nothing but math on this podcast, but worth just helping anyone, because sometimes people hear 1,500 per semester doesn't sound so much when you're talking about some of these other schools, but you're talking about that would be 3,000 per year off of 10,000. So that's 30% of your tuition right there was just in that one scholarship. So
Yes, and
yep,
we're usually the cream on the top. Like
yep,
students come to us usually loaded with scholarships anyway,
yep,
and we are just able to seal the deal and sweeten the pot at the end
yep.
usually. It's
Totally
also
makes
a
sense.
very affordable place to live.
Yep,
Wichita Falls is extremely affordable. And most of our students live on campus all 4 years that they're with us, which
cool.
is really nice.
Really cool. Yeah, and so let's talk about that. We'll wrap this section with just talk to me about the university itself outside of the theater program, both in terms of what does a campus look like, but then also stuff like academic opportunities. You know, how do students take advantage of specific academic opportunities? But then you also mentioned stuff like choir, other sort of things that the college does. So tell me about the broader university.
Absolutely. MSU was voted the most beautiful campus in Texas. So
Hey
we're
now.
very, very proud of that. We've got this very beautiful brick that is around our campus. We are about a big city block, so it's very walkable.
Mm-hmm.
Wichita Falls is very much a university town,
Mm-hmm.
which is really nice. Everybody here is really plugged into MSU and has a lot of school spirit, and we get a lot of support from the community.
Mm-hmm.
We also have two community theaters in town, so it's very much like a Texas theater town, which is
Mm-hmm.
great. We have students who we collaborate with the community theaters. One is very family focused. Also music directing for them right now. They're doing The Sound of Music. So
Mm-hmm.
we have a couple of students who are going to go out and do that show. And then we have another theater in town that students can work with as well. And we're all very supportive of each other. Other opportunities on campus, one of the things that I am involved in is student research because I also research and write. We have a Eureka project where there is scholarship money and budgets provided for students to do research, and that is in every discipline. And sometimes we collaborate with other disciplines, so that's really exciting.
Yeah.
Choir opportunity, band opportunity. We collaborate a lot with other departments. We did a collaboration with art in the spring. We did the musical Now Hear This,
Mm-hmm.
and we collaborated with the art department, and they made some video projections for us. And we used a live caption suit in the present moment in the musical. So we
Mm-hmm.
saw the actor in the suit and saw what the art students had projected up on the screen simultaneously.
Yep.
So a lot of opportunity for collaboration across campus as well.
And what about sort of in the non-theater world? I mean, are we going to sports on Friday nights? Or are there frats? I mean, what's sort of the college experience? Sort of if I want to go, I want to rest my theater self for a day or two. What does that look like at MSU compared to other schools?
Absolutely. We have football, which is a big deal. Sports are a big deal, soccer, basketball, all the things. And we have the fraternities and all of that. We also have a very active chapter of APO, Alpha Psi Omega.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it's delightful to me that when we're not in rehearsal for a main stage production, it seems like APO is putting on their own show.
Uh-huh.
So APO produced She Kills Monsters, and then last year they did a 24-hour play festival. So this is completely student produced. But again,
Uh-huh.
outside of the theater things,
Yep.
things that you can do. Yes, like going to the art shows, we do a lot of that. Our students just collaborated with the nursing department on a nursing disaster scenario. We do this
Hmm.
every year. Um, yeah,
Where
and
the
it's a
students are
lot of
playing
fun.
patients or playing whatever,
Yeah,
like, yeah, fun. Yeah.
they
Well,
are.
and that we haven't really talked much about that in terms of academically. Both we can talk about specific opportunities, but just even talking a little bit about the schedule, within the BFA, how many of your students are able to get external minors, meaning kind of non-theater minors and or double majors? Like, how does that work in terms of if I was interested in, let's say, acting and lighting design, it sounds like for the BFA theater, but also interested in psychology or something like that? How would that work in terms of my schedule and what's possible for me?
It's completely possible. It's just a matter of how long you want to be on campus.
Mhm.
So, double majoring is absolutely a possibility. It is probably going to take you 5 years.
Mhm.
So, I think it's just about going in. And then when we have the BFA in musical theater, that degree is very specific and concentrated to prepare our students to be performers.
Mhm.
So, that BFA is going to be more demanding than like a bachelor's of arts.
Yep.
So to come and get a BFA and then maybe get a BA in psychology or something else, I think it's just a matter of being honest about the time commitment and
Yep.
being willing to stay the extra year.
Totally makes sense. All right. Well, let's take a short break. And on the back end, we're going to chat a little bit about the audition and admission process. So we're back in a flash.
All right.
All right, we are back with Dr. Grace, and we're going to chat a little bit about the audition and admission process. And, so I already kind of mentioned it seems like an interesting, not unique as in singular, but certainly a rare BFA where you're admitted first from the university and then the audition is more about scholarship. Can you talk to me about what are the criterion for first that academically? So, what are we being looked at in terms of whether I'm going to get in from the university level and then what that audition looks like?
Yeah, so we want to see a 3.0 if possible for students in our program, in the theater program specifically.
Mm-hmm.
The grade point average that MSU is going to look at for general admittance is going to be like a 2.5 or a little bit lower.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big time commitment to do shows with us on top of your coursework. So we
Yep.
like to see freshmen coming in having a 3.0 or higher,
Mm-hmm.
because we believe they'll be successful at that
Yep.
point.
Totally makes sense. And do you know, like, do you interact with any part of that academic application? Are you seeing the grades and the essays or anything else that they have to do from an academic perspective?
I'm not. I'm When they come to audition for scholarship, that is one of our questions. We have a point
Mm-hmm.
system when we give scholarships. One of the
Yep.
questions is, what is your GPA? And
Yep.
that has a corresponding point value. And another question is, what is your class standing? Like, are
Yep.
you in the top 25% of your class? And
Totally.
that is another point value. And that is, again, just about wanting the students to be successful when they're here at MSU.
Yep. All right. So, and I want to talk about those auditions themselves. First off, how do those happen? So, they're mostly happening on campus. People are showing up on campus for an audition. Do we have anything virtual? How does that work in terms of how I would come to get that scholarship audition?
It can be on campus or virtual. We like it to be on campus. We
Mm-hmm.
like for a student to come to campus and spend a day or half of a day with us. So,
Yep.
ideally, you would sit in on a couple of classes and get to meet two different professors
Yep.
and then go to lunch with the student without a faculty member. So, you feel like you can really get the scoop and ask anything you want to ask.
Yep.
And then we'll do a campus tour, which goes through admissions. We'll do a tour of the theater building. And then usually we do the audition in the afternoon. The audition requirements for musical theater are going to be a song or a cut of a song. We ask for 60 to 90 seconds
Mm-hmm.
and a 60 to 90-second monologue.
Mm-hmm.
For someone majoring in performance, that's not musical theater performance, we ask for two contrasting monologues between 60 and 90 seconds. After the student performs the material, we have a conversation where we
Yep.
just say, what are you interested in? What questions do you have? We might give some feedback on the audition if they ask for that.
Yep.
And then, if we can, we like the student to stay for a performance or a rehearsal
Yep.
so that they can really see the work that we're doing.
Sounds like an awesome day. You mentioned some of those top of the sheet scores we're getting from the academics. I'd love to talk through sort of as you're watching the artistic audition. What are the other things that you're kind of sniffing for, and how do I get a good score on myself? Artistically. So,
Yes.
what are you looking for that would get a 5 or a 10 or whatever the goal that you're shooting for?
Good. I'm so excited to talk about this. So, as a voice teacher and music director, the first thing that I'm looking for in the song is that the student can sing a legato line in tune.
Hmm.
So, that's what I need to know. I need to know that in the middle of your voice, you can sing a musical phrase smoothly in tune,
Mm-hmm.
and that the voice is healthy. Because I
Mm-hmm.
can do anything. If we start there, I can teach you how to belt. I can teach
Mm-hmm.
you how to mix belt. I can teach you how to do the high notes. I need to know the instrument is healthy. So
Uh-huh.
that's a major thing. The other thing that we want to see in the acting, both in the song and in the monologue, is we want to see big choices.
Mm,
There's no such thing as a wrong choice or a bad choice. We want to see a committed choice.
mm,
It's nice when we can see contrast. So if the song is in a minor key and has a lot of angst or conflict, it's nice to see a comedic monologue
mm-hmm.
so that we can kind of see the range of what a student can do.
Mm-hmm.
We like to see all of the things: facial expression, gesture, blocking when that's appropriate for the audition,
Mm-hmm.
that you feel comfortable in your own skin on stage.
Mm-hmm.
And again, if we give a note, sometimes in an audition, we might ask for something that seems ironic,
Mm-hmm.
just to see if the student can take direction. So, a
Mm-hmm.
willingness to make a bold choice and try something new is very attractive for
Yep.
an actor. Yes.
Totally makes sense. And how would you specifically play with the voice? So I totally understand the idea of the adjustment of, hey, you've tried these two, everything's working. I'm going to give you a wacky adjustment. Let's see how this goes. What would that look like if, let's say, a student is not demonstrating they can sing a legato line in tune? What would you do vocalizing them to sort of investigate their voice?
I would probably say, can we go in my studio and can I vocalize you?
Uh huh.
So then, and then when we're in the studio, I could give very specific instructions. Like, let's try that on a closed oo vowel,
Uh
knowing
huh.
that oo brings in a lot of head voice. So if I need more information,
Yep.
going to the piano with the student and doing some simple vocal exercises and giving some simple coaching can answer that question for me about, because sometimes it's like, oh, it's just tongue tension and I can fix that.
Uh huh. Yep.
Right? Or it could be like, oh my gosh, that sounds like it could be vocal nodes. And then a
Yep.
conversation about like, do you sleep with a humidifier?
Yep.
Like, do you have a cough? Things like that. So we could start to, once they're on campus, I'm invested. If
Yep.
any student comes to campus and auditions for us, I will give you a 20-30 minute voice lesson because I want you to come here because you want to work with us and you want what
Yes.
we have to offer. So
Totally.
at the point the student is showing up on campus, or even at the point that the student is emailing me, I feel like my job is to help them find the right place.
Yep. I love it. We often use that kind of dating analogy on the show that it should be dating in both people. You're deciding who to take, but they're also saying, does this feel right for me? I'd love to talk about sort of, you mentioned the conversation you have. So if there's sort of the adjustment portion where you may throw things at them in the conversation, what are you investigating in terms of the kind of questions you would ask a student and then what you might be looking for in terms of their responses?
Yeah. So the first thing I'm looking for is to make sure that they can phonate on every pitch throughout their range so that I actually know that the vocal cords and the larynx are performing properly and healthy. And
Mm-hmm.
that is the case 99% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Even if there is something like lip tension, tongue tension, the voice is nasal, all of those things we can absolutely fix as long as the voice is healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So a simple exercise like, can you do a siren? Can you go, "Woo?" That tells me that the voice is healthy. So
Yep.
it
And
could be,
for
and a
those
lot
who
of
are just not watching the video, when Dr. Grace did that, the glass just shattered in her
times,
room. I don't know if you saw that. There's just everything exploded. No, keep going. Sorry.
but a lot of times I come from a place of silly. Let's
Mm-hmm.
be silly. Like, we're not singing, we're just making noise. And then later on, we can turn that into something like, let's say I have a student who comes in and they're belting, and the belt is amazing. And
Yep.
they're belting, maybe this time, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
it's really low. And then we get into the studio and I'm like, I'd like to hear your head voice.
Mm-hmm.
And the student says, I don't sing in my head voice. I'm an alto, I'm a belter. And I
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, can you whimper like a puppy dog? Can we, like, we're not singing. Let's just see,
Mm-hmm.
let's just play around and make some noise. Can you do this with me? Can you mimic me? Can we do this together?
Mm-hmm.
And then if we can we turn that into,
Mhm.
Like what's the next building block? Where can we go next? Baby steps in a playful way.
Yep, totally makes sense. I'd love to talk a little bit about the other side of that conversation. So, in terms of like your pitch to students, imagining we're gonna have a decent number of listeners, especially ones in the Texas area, but even some maybe who aren't, who are gonna say, "This program sounds interesting. I want to check this out," but I'm also looking at a bunch of other programs. Two, as a program, which admitted to you in the break, I was saying it's not a program that I knew well at all. It was not on my radar, and I think that's gonna be true for a lot of families. Do you have like a pitch of like how you are choosing to distinguish yourself? Like, do you have a like, hey, we're sort of like this program, but we're cheaper, or we're like nothing you've never seen before because of the way we put it together? Like, how do you, if a student is going, if they were to ask you audaciously, why should I choose MSU over three or four other options? What sort of feels like your pitch of going, here's why I'm getting students to sign on the dotted line.
Absolutely. A couple of super important things. We are big on creating a culture of consent. So we want everyone in the room to feel like they have a voice and their voice is valid. And that's something that's very important to me. That means we're using intimacy choreographers and fight choreographers and cultural consultant. We're talking about lived experience. Yes, all of those things. The
Mm-hmm.
second thing I would say is opportunity to have a student who can, and this is a student that we had last year who was in our student directed play at the beginning of the semester as one of the leads, then was my costume designer for the checkoff, the second
Mm-hmm.
production, then directed the third production. I don't know of another program that offers that kind of opportunity,
Uh-huh.
and that was particularly interesting. For that was a reason I wanted to work here, is we are
Yep.
small enough that once you were in our community, you were going to get big opportunities to do all the things that you want to do, as long as you are on time and you show up and you're nice, right?
Yep. Yep, I love that. That's a great pitch. It's really, and I do agree. I think that is not a specific. What you just outlined is not a specific pitch we've heard on 190 episodes of this podcast. We haven't heard that exact pitch yet. I'd love to talk a little bit about sort of if you have any kind of goals for growth in terms of the program itself. Obviously you're coming on a podcast like this where you're going to have thousands of listeners and maybe more people potentially auditioning and looking at admittance to your program. You know, do you have ways in which you're hoping to grow or not? I mean, some newer programs will come on the pod and say, "Give me 10 years, I'm going to be Juilliard. I'm going to be Michigan." To feel that kind of energy. Whether they say that exactly, it kind of could feel like that's the goal. Is the goal to go, "Hey, I really want us to be a known name on the Broadway stages"? Is it, "Hey, I want us to keep growing organically in this way"? Like, do you have a sense of sort of what you want the program to be 10 years from now?
I do. So the BFA in musical theater at MSU is new. It
Mm-hmm.
is in its third year, and this degree created my position. So I'm in a new position coming in to
Yep.
teach musical theater at MSU. My goals are not about increasing the size of our student population or having more majors. It is absolutely about increasing the quality of their experience and their marketability as
Mm-hmm.
performers. Some of the things that we've done since I got here last spring, we did the Pirates of Penzance with full orchestra. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a big deal for us. So we had singers unmiked singing with full orchestra, and I was very,
Mm-hmm.
very proud of that. We are about to do Godspell with the rock band. So very proud of that. So
Mm-hmm.
my growth ideas are about providing better instruction, more support, and more opportunities for our students so that they do get out there on Broadway. I am fortunate that I have a couple of students from my previous institution. I have one in Back to the Future right now. So
Mm-hmm.
I've had several students graduate and go on and be very successful working as performers. MSU needed a voice teacher in the theater department.
Uh-huh.
So as we continue to specialize in musical theater and grow that program, I anticipate that our quality will get stronger as our students learn more and get stronger in their craft.
Yep. Very well said. All right, well, let's wrap with. I know we already given a little bit of parental advice, and we talked about sort of transferable skills. But I'd love to talk to our parent listeners. You know, a good chunk of our listeners are parents who listen sort of for their children as they're investigating. Have you seen this program? And what sort of advice would you give to parents who are trying to guide their children through this process? You know, I've now noticed. I started off sort of giving that advice of like if they're juniors and seniors going through the process. We now have parent listeners who, if the kids are in eighth grade or whatever, you know, so just looking at guiding a student who is interested in theater, interested in pursuing theater, what advice would you have to that parent?
Yeah, I think I'll start with a story from this morning. So, we have good boundaries about like the students can text me on my cell phone when we're in production and they're
Wait,
my
those are good boundaries? Those sound like
I
no
know
boundaries.
we have some boundaries. So but genuinely we communicate over email and things like that.
Uh-huh.
This morning I gave a theater history 3 final at
Mm-hmm.
8 a.m., which is tough because we had callbacks for Godspell last night.
It's cruel. It's cruel, not tough. It's cruel. It's mean.
Well, I
Yeah.
know I didn't make the schedule, right? So at 8:20, I noticed one of my students wasn't here and I thought, okay, I've never called this student before, but I'm going to call her. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's the kind of attention our students get. That if
Mm-hmm.
your student is supposed to be taking their theater history exam at 8 o'clock on a Monday morning and they're not there at 8:20, the professor will call them on their cell
Mm-hmm.
phone. And I think that's what I want parents to know is that we are small enough that we
Mm-hmm.
see our students nearly every day. If something is up with them, we know it immediately and we care about them and we reach out and we say, hey, what's going on? We are
Mm-hmm.
also friends as colleagues. So I just
Mm-hmm.
texted this morning with my friend who's in the music department, the voice teacher in the music department, with myself being the voice teacher in the theater department. I was like, your kids were awesome in callbacks last night. And she said, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
haven't seen this one in a couple of weeks. And so, it's this like
Mm-hmm.
checking in and checking up and supporting. And MSU does a good job of helping young people transition from high school and living with their parents through 4 years of college and into the real world in a
Mm-hmm.
way that can be a stepping stone where faculty and staff are going to be plugged in and aware of what's going on with the students.
Yep. So well said. If people want to check out more information on MSU, where's the best place? Do you like social media? Right to the website? Should they be reaching out to you directly on your cell phone at 8 a.m.? What's the way that you want people to be checking out more stuff on MSU?
Yeah, I am happy to answer emails. So my email is grace.edgar@msutexas.edu. I get lots of emails from prospective students, and I really enjoy helping them get acquainted with our programs and begin the application process. And I walk with them all the way through the audition and even after the audition, talking about, hey, I know you're coming in as a freshman. We have auditions for the fall shows on the second day of classes. So just making
Mm-hmm.
sure we're small enough that we really can keep tabs on everyone.
I love it. Well, Dr. Grace, thanks so much for the time today. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you.